Hello and welcome to your 2-3 conditional statements lesson. We are going to start off with a conditional statement, and a lot of times you'll see this in science class. Conditional is an if-then statement, and we use symbols to describe that. P for our hypothesis, and then Q for our conclusion. So our hypothesis is the phrase immediately following the word if. So if something, hypothesis, then, and then after the word then is our conclusion. So let's go ahead and identify, and then we'll go ahead and practice writing after that. So for these first few, starting with A, we're going to circle the hypothesis and underline the conclusion. I'm also going to be labeling P and Q. So A, if a polygon has 6 sides, then it is a hexagon. So remember, it's after the word if we see our hypothesis, our P. Then, after our then, it's our conclusion, our Q. The next one, though, be careful because I see my if right here. So that means that the hypothesis is that she is completing the maze in her computer game. That's the hypothesis. And the conclusion is she will advance to the next level. So go ahead and try C and D on your own and then check when you're ready. And hopefully you got C right, and D did have a little trick in there because the if is in the middle. So double check that you got that one correct. Now we're going to practice writing the if-then statement. So starting with A, and we need to also make sure that we are talking about if it's a figure, if it's an animal, if it's what it is, before we just say if and make it sound like proper English. So we're not going to say if 5-sided polygon. That doesn't sound like a complete sentence. So we're going to say if a polygon has 5 sides, then it's a pentagon. So we want to make it sound right. So try it out. If a polygon has 5 sides, then it is a pentagon. All right, so on the next one, if you would like to try that one out, it's pretty easy to make that one into an if-then sentence. And hopefully you got if an angle measures 45 degrees, or if an angle is 45 degrees, then it is an acute angle. And there is B written out. So on the next one, we're not going to say if an obtuse triangle then has one obtuse angle. That doesn't sound right. So again, if a figure or if a triangle is obtuse, then, so it's up to you however you want to say it, but make sure you're either saying if a figure is an obtuse triangle, or if the triangle goes specific first of what it is you're talking about, and then if there is some sort of description, you do that after, then your conclusion. And there it is written out. If a figure is an obtuse triangle, then it has exactly one obtuse angle. All right, this next one, birds and blue jays. So blue jay is our hypothesis, and then birds is our conclusion. So if you want to try that one, go ahead and write that out and check when you're ready. Now on this one, we wouldn't start out with if the bird is a blue jay, then it is a bird. So we would do animal because it is an animal. And we wouldn't just say if a blue jay, then it's a bird. That doesn't sound like proper English again. So if an animal is a blue jay, then it is a bird. All right, so now we're going to get into if something is true or false, the statements. Now, there is a kind of weird one, so that's where there's alert. A conditional with a false hypothesis. So the first thing that we're saying is false, then it is always considered a true statement. Kind of a weird thing, but If I start out with something funky and false, it is true. Our overall statement is true. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice it. Most of them make pretty much our common sense. So if last month was February, then this month is March. That would be true because March comes after February. In a rectangle has an obtuse angle, then it's a parallelogram. So that would be a slanted, looking like that. And yes, that is true because we'd have this obtuse angle. If Mrs. McWhorter teaches geometry, which is true, then everyone has a C in her class. Well, that would be considered false because we know that not everyone has a C in her class. So if you can think of a false counterexample, like an example that would prove that false, then you circle false and we give that. So some may have an A, B, D, or F. Hopefully not, but hopefully they all have A's or B's. All right, then this next one, 2 plus 2 is 7. Well, we know that's false, and remember what we had our alert, if it's a false hypothesis, it's always true. So that is actually going to be true. And it's just one of those funky ones. If two angles are acute, then they are congruent. Are all acute angles congruent? Well, that is false because I can think of an example where we would have 25 degrees and 45 degrees, and those are two acute angles, but they're not congruent. Last one, if you want to try it, go for it. Otherwise, keep watching. This one, if it's an even number greater than 2 is prime, then 5 plus 4 is 8. Well, let's first look at this one. An even number greater than 2 is prime. Well, that is false because if we have an even number, it's not prime. It's divisible by 2. So that means with this hypothesis being false, automatically it's true. All right, we're going to now write what's called a converse statement. It's where we switch or exchanging the hypothesis and the conclusion. So let's take a look at this first example. And we're going to start with a bat. We're going to just write the if-then, the conditional statement. So if an animal, because we're talking about an animal, I want to get kind of specific but general in a sense, is a bat, then what? Then it can fly. Is that true? Yeah, if it's a bat, it can fly. All right, the converse. So now we're going to switch. We're going to put the can fly and then the bat part. So if an animal can fly, then it is a bat. So if are all flying animals bats? No, because we could think of a bird, like one of our previous examples. So just because it's flying doesn't mean that it has to be a bat. All right, try this one and see if you are right. So pause, try it, and then push play and check your answer. All right, you should have had true. If the deer population increases, then the food was available. This next one, if the food was available, we're switching because it's the converse, then the deer population increased. So I have true because we're not really thinking of any other outside things, but if there's food, then the population's going to increase. I wasn't really thinking of like hunters or illness or all that other. We're in our happy setting of the world, thinking happy thoughts. We're going to just go from there. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about is biconditional statements. All definitions are biconditional statements. So that is where the converse is also true and can be written as a biconditional statement. So we can go back and forth from the if to the then of our conditional, and then we can reverse it, and it's still true. So definitions are mainly what we are going to be talking about. So segments are congruent if and only if segments have the same measure. Angles are congruent if and only if angles have the same measure. Right angle. If an angle is a right angle, or an angle is a right angle, if and only if. So there's no if and then. The middle is where we put the if and only if, which we can abbreviate with IFF. It is that representation of if and only if. If and only if that measures 90. A segment ray bisects a segment if and only if the segment ray goes through the midpoint. A segment ray bisects an angle if and only if the segment array cuts the angle perfectly into two. Let's get rid of this part. Oops. Don't even know what that is. There we go. Two angles are complementary if and only if the sum of the angles is 90 for complementary. Two angles are supplementary if and only if the sum of the angles is, 180.